Hey everybody, and welcome back to Game of Thrones Power Rankings. This episode is for Season 6, Episode 7, A Broken Man. Now, first off, I'd like to talk about some honorable mentions, people who just missed the list. First off, we have Blackfish. He had some great scenes today with Jaime, really sizing him up and tearing him down as well. He just seemed rigid. He wasn't going to give in to Edmure's killing just because he's his nephew. I mean, he is just concerned with his people and his land, and he refuses to give it up. And as he said, the war is not over until he's gone. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with him and Jaime, and it's going to be hard to see either one of them lose. But I can really get behind some of Blackfish's motivation for fighting, like I said, with his home and his family. Plus, he's got that connection to the Starks, so we'll just have to see what happens. But he almost made the list. I just needed a little more from him. And if he does something great in the battle coming up, he can definitely find his way onto this list. Next up on our honorable mentions is someone who fell off of last week's list, Samwell Tarly. Now, as I said last week, he just made the list because of that ballsy move to take the Valyrian sword from his father. But this week there was a lot of movement and a character who came back who I didn't even have ranked previously. So there was just too many good things up there for Sam to stay on. Maybe he'll get back up there if he finds a key piece of information in Old Town, but until then, he is in the honorable mentions. Next up in honorable mentions, another character who fell out of the top 20, Sansa Stark. This one hurt me, and originally I didn't have her dropping this far, but she had a real shit week. First off, in these negotiations she went to with the Onion Knight and Jon, she was pretty much useless. She didn't help out at the Wildling camp, which I expected. I didn't expect her to do anything wild there. But then we got to the Mormont place, and the one thing she did do was compliment Lady Mormont in the complete wrong way. And I'd just like to say, Lyanna Mormont was a complete badass this week, and she almost made it onto my list if I knew that she wasn't going to be as involved in the show. But I would love to see more of her. But Sansa complimented her mother on her great beauty, and even I know that the Mormonts aren't known for their beauty. They're known for their fighting skills. I mean, that's just... Come on, Sansa, this is what you're supposed to be good at. This house relations and complimenting and being a lady... And she just kind of screwed the pooch there. But that wasn't even the worst moment, because then they go to House Glover, and it seems like they're fighting a losing battle, and Glover's going back in, and then she speaks up, and I'm like, hey, maybe she's going to say something to bring him over to her side. Nope. She insults his entire integrity by saying that you're still sworn to my house. To which he quickly reminds her, her house is dead. She might have been out of the picture for a long time, getting abused by Joffrey and in King's Landing, and then being caravanned around by Littlefinger and sent to the Boltons, but the Starks started a war for her, and then, as Glover said, pretty much screwed all the northern houses by taking up with some lady and breaking his vows to the Freys, which got them all killed. So they're not really looked at too favorably after that, and she just comes in boasting how they still have to be loyal to them. Complete wrong thing to do, completely broke that alliance with really no hope of bringing it back. And I just really didn't like what I saw from Sansa. She wasn't even an asset to either Jon or Davos this week. And there's a lot of movement on the list, and unfortunately she just had to fall off the list this week. There's a good chance she can make it back up, but after a really strong season so far, this was a really poor episode of showing kind of old Sansa again that I really didn't want to see creep back up. I mean, this is what she should be good at. She knows all about the houses. She was taught it by old Nan her whole life. This was all she was, and she just really has the wrong foot in right now, and hopefully she can figure it out in the coming weeks. Next up on our honorable mentions is the Waif. The Waif had a huge week this week when she stabbed Arya about 2 or 3 times, but she didn't quite make the list because I hate her and I don't know what her deal is, and there seems like a lot more to be revealed about her, so we'll just have to wait and see what happens with her. But that does it for our honorable mentions, other than, I'm sorry, I almost forgot, the Mountain, who is now at the top of honorable mentions, especially with the return of another character that could set up a pretty interesting trial by combat in the future, hopefully. So let's go ahead and get into our list. Starting at number 20, we have Davos Seaworth. This guy wasn't on the list last week, but he sure as hell is this week. After a great scene where he defused the bomb that was Lyanna Mormont, he really got back in the good graces of myself and many others. He was the only option they had at the Mormonts because both Jon and Sansa had completely flopped and treated her like a little girl. But leave it to Davos to really know how to talk to a little girl and not talk down to her. He has a lot of experience with his connection with Shireen, and he used that to help secure the forces of the Mormonts. And this just reminded me of all the other awesome things he's done. I mean, he survived the Battle of Blackwater, even though he was in that water when the wildfire went up. He was Stannis' right-hand man for the longest time and really gave him the smartest counsel, especially considering the Red Woman was in his ear and in his all other kind of places for most of the time. But it was always Davos that kept him at least a little on the straight line. But, I mean, Davos said it himself this week. He's come from completely different circumstances and risen himself up pretty much by himself to becoming an actual house, even though he started as a smuggler. The guy's awesome. I'm so glad he's teamed up with Jon in his second council. And of course this week Sansa was like, he's really your second in command? Because it just proves even more she doesn't know what she's talking about. Because this guy is absolutely his second in command and is one of the best people he could have in his ear because he knows the land, he knows the other lands, and he just knows people, period. So hopefully he can rise up. We'll have to see how he does in the coming weeks. Coming in at number 20, once again, we have Bran Stark. Now, we didn't get anything new from Bran, but he didn't do anything terrible like kill Hodor this episode, so I didn't really feel like we had to move him down. There wasn't too much movement that had made him move down, so he ended up staying at the same spot. We'll probably check in with him next episode, but until then, he's keeping his spot at number 19. Coming in at number 18 is once again Benjen Coldhands. Kind of the same story with Bran. I'm excited to see more from him. I love him. Nobody got the chance to move up past him because he really had a strong opening episode last week. Well, not opening episode, but you know what I mean. And we'll just have to see where he moves when we get back to his storyline. Here we are at number 17, and we have someone who's fallen 2 spots this week. It is Daenerys Stormborn, whatever the hell else she wants to be called. Now, obviously we didn't get anything from her, so I didn't move her down because I didn't like something that she did, but like I said, there was a lot of movement and a lot of surprises this week that I had to account for, and unfortunately she had to fall with those surprises that came. We'll have to see what she gets up to next week, but until then, she is firmly stated at number 17. At number 16, we have Marjorie Tyrell. Now, Marjorie Tyrell also fell in the power rankings, partially because of what I saw from her and partially because of some other characters jumping her. This week, we got her playing along once again to the Sparrow, pretending to learn the scriptures, using his words against him, playing along, saying she'll do what he wants. Just, it's really clear that she has something planned in the end here. Hopefully she's not overextending her hand too much. We got to see an interesting scene with her and Olenna. For a long time there, I really thought she had completely fallen under the Sparrow's spell, but it looks like by giving that little rose insignia to her, that she at least has some kind of plan, and that Olenna trusts her enough to see what she's got planned. So, obviously she didn't reveal that plan this week, so I couldn't move her up. But she's still on the list, and she still has a chance to move up depending on whatever she has up her sleeve. At number 15, we have Ramsay Bolton. We didn't see much from him this week, or anything at all. He ended up going down 2 spots, mainly because of some jumps other characters did. Unfortunately for him, we got some pretty cool stuff from people who were below him last week, so he ended up slipping down those 2 spots, but he is still quite high on the list. And he'll have his chance to do something just vile, I'm sure, to try and take some kind of control. Plus, we have Bastard Bowl coming up, so there's always that. But we'll just have to wait and see. Coming in at number 14 is Arya Stark. Now, Arya has dropped 3 spots, and this is because of what I saw from her. Now, we see her paying for passage home and then having a quiet little moment to herself of just like, oh my gosh, I'm happy, I'm gonna leave. This is so pretty though. And then she falls for the oldest trick in the assassination book. Waif comes up to her dressed as some kind of old lady and just slashes her across the stomach and stabs her and twists. And then luckily Arya's able to jump over that bridge and go into the water. And then luckily the waif is a really terrible assassin and doesn't wait an extra 10 seconds to see if someone's going to come out of the water because she's never seen any movie ever. So Arya escapes, but we leave Arya just walking through the city of Bravos bleeding and not sure if she can trust anybody, not knowing who she can go to for help. So they really left it in an awkward position, and hopefully next week she finds somebody to help. But this whole scene just felt weird to me. I mean, right off the bat, she starts getting stabbed, and I'm like, no, this isn't happening, this can't happen, it's too early, they're not going to kill her. But they really put themselves in a real awkward position to where, how the hell is she going to get out of this? We'll just have to wait and see, but hopes are not high unless Cyril Farrell or somebody shows up with some kind of magic bandages. I really don't know what's going to happen. Next up, we have Tormund Giantsbane. This dude had a monster of a week, and he was only in one scene, but he almost single-handedly brought the wildlings over to Jon's side. He's the one who told them, this guy's already died. He died for us. If we don't die for him, we're all a bunch of cowards. And that played a huge part in swaying that argument. The only other part that really swayed that was when 1-1 went ahead and said, "Snow," and chose that side, which was like the biggest pickup in a game of pickup basketball ever. Immediately, the wildling commander was like, yeah, I think we're going to join Jon's side. I don't know why. Just, it seems like a good idea now. But Tormund did a great job of appealing to his people and choosing the right decision for his people and for Jon and for the realm. I loved it, and I can't wait to see more from him. But he moved up 4 spots this week, the highest jump of anybody on the list. And it was also because of some other people's idiocy and his own awesomeness. Right above Tormund at number 12, the Hound! The Hound is back! He's back, you guys. I left him off my list last week because, like many others, I assumed he was left for dead when Arya left him on that mountainside. But as Ian McShane told us, he found him, he healed him up, and he's ready to go. I'm ready for Clegane Bowl. I want this so bad. I love the Hound. He's done so much good in the show. He saved Sansa from that awkward situation, which, let's be honest, was a pretty brutal rape in King's Landing. He had some of the greatest buddy moments ever with Arya that whole season where they were running around the Riverlands. I love that. I really want to see them meet up again if that happens ever, if that's possible. But this guy's awesome. He is kind of despicable, but at the same time, he is a product of his surroundings. He's one of the few people who understands, you know what, this life is tough. That farmer back there wouldn't have made it to winter. He doesn't need this gold. As harsh as it sounds, it's kind of true. You can't help but root for the guy, especially with such a tragic backstory with his brother, and now a chance to get revenge on his brother once and for all. I really love it. I can't wait to see what he does. It was sad to see him get yanked away from that peaceful life and just yanked back to just violence and a life of violence that he's always known. It was interesting to see the Brotherhood without banners come and kill those people because we haven't really seen them be that villainous before. I mean, we've seen them have interactions with the Hound before. Those were the people he fought who had the flaming sword, and then he killed and was brought back to life, and then they released him. So it'll be kind of interesting to see how that resolves itself and have another kind of meetup between them. But I love that he's back. I didn't see it coming at all, and I'm so glad that he didn't die. Coming in at number 11, the Night's King. He wasn't even in this episode, and he ended up jumping a spot, mainly because Arya just kind of got suckered into one of the oldest tricks in the books, like I said. But this guy's coming. He's got a force of undead at his will. Who knows what other magical tricks he can do. And right now, we're all just praying that wall stays up for just about ever, because if it falls, we're in some real friggin' trouble, I'll tell you that. Starting off the top 10, We have Brienne. Brienne has fallen 1 spot. We didn't see anything from her this week, but some other people made some big power plays. But according to the promotion, she'll be down in River Run next week and have a meetup with Jamie again. So she'll have her chance to reclaim that spot. Don't you worry. Plus, we finally get a meetup between them again. I'm so excited. But that's next week. Coming in at number 9, Cersei Lannister. Cersei had the largest drop in the top 10 this week, and it's for a reason. The one scene we got from her, she was absolutely savaged by Olenna. She comes in trying to form some kind of party or some kind of agreement with her to take back both of their grandsons. And it occurred to me this week how much of a mirror they both are to each other. I mean, Olenna is basically Cersei in a couple of years, completely living for her grandchildren and wielding power through how her grandchildren are now ruling. And it's interesting to see them both trying to get back their grandchildren and save them, but in different ways. But Olenna just absolutely gave it to Cersei this week, and she just stood there and had to take it. She didn't have any comebacks because the High Sparrow is entirely her fault, and everyone around King's Landing does hate her, and she has run out of people who are on her side, and her only option left is pretty much to kill everybody. Olenna has her completely pegged. One of the most savage things she said was that Cersei is probably the most vile person she has ever met, and you know Olenna has met some vile people in all her years of politicizing and all of this. So that was a pretty savage remark that really cut to the deep, and Cersei just didn't have her usual witty smirks and comebacks to come back at her with. So with all those glaring defects really pointed out by Olenna, I had no choice but to drop her. I had no choice but to have Olenna above her, and hopefully Cersei can regain some of her stock next week, because it seems like she's headed down a bad path, as is Jaime. Speaking of Jaime comes in at number 8. Jaime's down at River Run trying to retake that castle with the Freys, who he absolutely handled like children. It was really great to see some earlier Game of Thrones Jaime, of him back in command of an army, back really where he should be, back in his comfort space. He walks in, he just tells them, "You guys don't know what the heck you're doing. I'm taking over. What do you think would happen if I told you I would smack you if you said another word?" And then he opens his mouth and he just smacks him back to the ground. He says, "If you don't like it, you can go ahead and leave. This is my prisoner now. You guys don't know what you're doing." And then he sets up a meeting with the Blackfish, hopefully to try and convince him to leave. Doesn't quite go as planned, because the Blackfish is about as hard as his armor, which is amazing, by the way. I love it. But as the Blackfish said at the end of that interaction, he kind of just wanted to size up the Kingslayer, and he's not impressed. And I can understand why. With all the allure he had and how cocky Jaime was in the early seasons, losing his hand really took a lot out of him. He really just lost some of that charm, and the Blackfish sees it. So it'll be interesting to see if Jaime can prove the Blackfish wrong and can get inside of that tower, because the Blackfish is right. He doesn't have the materials for a 2-year siege. So this will really be all on Jaime to prove how good of a commander he really is, because the Blackfish has the moral high ground. He's fighting for his people. He's fighting in an almost impenetrable fortress. And this might be the end of the road for Jaime. So we'll just have to see what he can pull out. Maybe Bronn can help him, but Jaime's in a tough spot, and we'll just have to see how he digs himself out. Coming in at number 7, as I said earlier, Olenna Tyrell. Now, she had a great scene with Marjorie where she tried to break through what seemed like a doughy-eyed look of all the High Sparrow's ideals, but which we kind of figured out was more of a master plan, and Olenna had the smarts to sit back and say, "All right, if you think you know what you're doing, I'll go ahead and let you do this." And then she had that just absolute takedown of Cersei, where she just completely took her to the ground, and she had no comeback, and she just had to walk out of there completely quietly without any kind of agreement agreed upon, because Olenna was just having none of it and didn't even want to deal with someone as terrible as Cersei, in her words. So Olenna had a big week and ended up climbing up 3 spots into the 7th spot. and we'll just have to see how she continues from here. In the 6th spot, one of my favorite characters that I've talked about and that finally made his return this week, Bronn, the best sellsword in all the land, is back. He's back with a Lannister at his side. Him and Jaime's rapport has really risen. I loved when Jaime was about to tell him the Lannister motto. Lannister man always, and he's like, don't say it. Don't frickin' say it. Because he's just so used to Tyrion. I love seeing Bronn in more of a military style because he clearly knows what he's talking about. He immediately gets on the phrase for how they're digging their trenches and where they're setting up and what kind of siege towers they should be doing, because he knows his stuff. He knows men, he knows war, he knows battle. And I love Bronn, and Bronn had some great quippy moments today, throwing out all sorts of jokes and barbs and just staring down anyone who gives him shit because he doesn't care. This guy's one of the best. Thank goodness he's with Jaime, because he's probably going to have to save Jaime's ass a couple of times with that excuse of a hand. And we'll just have to see what happens here and how he affects the siege. But for right now, Bronn's hopped 2 spaces and he's at number 6, just outside the top 5. Not bad for a lowly sellsword from the Vale. Now, unfortunately, the top 5 is usually the most exhilarating and most interesting part of these lists, but we didn't get anything really from pretty much anyone in this top 5. Coming in at number 5, we have Littlefinger. There was a little tease from Sansa that she's writing a letter, hopefully to Littlefinger for his support, since she pretty much screwed up all the other negotiations. She's going to have to fall back on the Littlefinger card, which is a great card to play because I'm pretty sure he's always going to be at her back. I don't know. I'm a Littlefinger supporter. I really think that his love for Catelyn and for the Stark girls kind of outweighs a lot of his Chaos Ladder climbing. Not all of it, mind you. I'm sure if he had the chance to ride that Iron Throne in exchange for Sansa, he'd do it, but that's just about the only thing I think he would put above Sansa Stark. So hopefully he can get back in the game and lend his Knights of the Vale to the Bastard Bowl, because that could really be a game-changing blow. But didn't get anything from him this week, and no one had the balls to climb up above him. Coming in at number 4, we have the Sparrow. We got a great scene of him talking to Marjorie, kind of knowing that she's kind of playing him, but also kind of trying to get her to give an heir to Tommen, which she agrees to. So for all intents and purposes, he believes he's still pretty much in charge. She certainly didn't climb above him this week. Tommen's pretty much just a joke, and Littlefinger isn't even in the area, so he doesn't have a chance. The High Sparrow still just riding high at number 4 as pretty much the new king of King's Landing. Then we have Jon at number 3. I liked the scenes Jon was in. The problem was this week he wasn't really the game changer in any of them. I mean, when he was talking to the wildlings, it was other people talking about him that got them to change their minds. Tormund talking him up, all sorts of stuff like that. Then when they were at the Mormont place, it was Davos talking him up. But it wasn't really Jon doing the act of himself changing their minds. And when they talked to the Glovers, he tried his best, but that was kind of a lost cause, especially after Sansa got in there. So I don't blame him for that. I'll say this, though. He looked great. I didn't like that coat at first when Sansa gave it to him, but it's really grown on me, and he looks like a northerner, and it just suits him perfectly. So he definitely looks great, and he's definitely going to have a chance to do some crazy shit when this Bastard Bowl kicks off later in the season. Coming down to our top 2, we still have Varys the Spider. We didn't see anything from Varys this week. We're still trying to see how this whole agreement with the slavers worked out, what Dany's going to do when she gets back to the city. Hopefully that's coming up soon, because it'll be interesting to see what she thinks of the whole matter and whether or not him and Tyrion can convince her that this is still the right move, considering that she just kind of brought on these supporters and she doesn't even really know Varys now that I think about it. So they'll have an interesting little first interaction, but he should be able to convince her that he's on her side, because it seems that he's been a Targaryen supporter for quite a long time. Plus, he left his position in Westeros just to talk to her, but knowing her and knowing how she holds grudges from way back in the past that shouldn't really affect her decision-making anymore like she does with Jorah, she'll probably just lock him up in the prisons and never talk to him or use his counsel. We'll just have to see, though. And once again, at our Iron Throne at number 1, Tyrion Lannister. Who else, you guys? He didn't do anything monumentally dumb, and he didn't die this week, so there's no chance he's dropping out of the top spot. Varys wasn't there to take it from him. Jon didn't do anything spectacular. And the Sparrow has pretty much reached his peak as where he can be unless he kills off some other people. But that's not going to happen, and Tyrion is still by far the best. He hasn't come crumbling down in any kind of form in Meereen. None of his decisions have caused anything bad yet. So we'll just have to see what he does and how he interacts with the Greyjoys when they finally get there, because it seems like they're going to go there to talk to Dany and give her some ships. It'll be interesting to see what Tyrion thinks of that and how he's going to communicate that to Dany. But Tyrion's still at our number one, and as I said last week, it's going to be pretty damn hard to knock him off that top spot unless some kind of crazy bastard bowl incident happens. We'll just have to wait, though. Tyrion's still number one on the Game of Thrones power rankings for Season 6, Episode 7, The Broken Man. So, guys, let me know what you thought of my top 20. A lot of changes this week. Probably a lot of people not liking what happened. But there was just a lot of big moves being made and a lot of stupid moves being made. So that's going to lead to a lot of change on this list. I'm real excited to see what's going to happen next episode, because as you know, every episode can change this thing drastically. I mean, the Hound wasn't even on the list last week. And now the guy's just a couple steps out of the top 10. So, depending on what he does with that axe he picked up, he might be able to climb up that high. Plus, next week we have Brienne and Jaime back together. We might get a little closer to that trial by combat, maybe some more Daenerys stuff, hopefully. Back to Bran and Benjen, I hope. And we'll just have to see. Maybe some other first-timers can climb on the list. Maybe someone will drop out of the list, but we won't know till episode 8. Till then, you guys, thanks so much for watching. Please like and subscribe down below. Leave a comment. Leave who you think your list would be, where I got it wrong, who should be on that isn't even on, and what I overthought. But until then, this is Movie Mammoth signing off. Thank you, guys and gals.